I was halfway home from a 12-hour shift when I saw two men drop a child like trash onto the pavement. His tiny chest barely moved, each breath scraping the night air like it hurt to live. I didn't think. I just grabbed him and ran through the dark, counting seconds against his silence. Somewhere between those 8 blocks and the hospital doors, I realized I might not make it back home either. It was just another late shift, the kind that leaves your back aching and your brain fogged from the smell of cardboard and machine oil. I clocked out a little past 9, thinking about the leftovers I'd left for Lily and whether she'd remembered to brush her teeth before bed. She's 8 now, old enough to stay home for a few hours, but I still hate walking in and finding the apartment dark. Makes me feel like I'm failing her, even when I'm doing everything I can. The air was cold that night, sharp enough to sting my lungs as I cut through Maple Avenue, the shortcut I always take to shave off 15 minutes from the walk home. The street was empty, the kind of quiet that makes you hear your own heartbeat. That's when I heard it, shouting. 2 figures ahead, both men, struggling to carry something between them. At first, I thought it was a drunk or maybe a fight. But then the moonlight caught a small shoe, blue, with a cartoon rocket on the side. My stomach dropped. It wasn't something. It was someone. A kid. They stopped in the middle of the street, arguing in low, angry voices. This wasn't supposed to happen, the tall one hissed. We need to move. Now, said the other, his voice trembling. Then, like I was watching a nightmare, they dropped the child. Just let him fall like a bag of trash. His body hit the pavement with a sound I'll never forget. They ran off, disappearing into the dark. For a second, I couldn't move. Every instinct said to stay hidden, to call 911, to mind my own damn business like people in this neighborhood learned the hard way. But something about the way that boy's chest moved, barely rising, barely falling, kicked every ounce of logic out of me. I ran to him. His skin was pale, his lips tinged blue. I could hear it, the high-pitched, wheezing gasp that still haunts my dreams. Severe asthma attack. I'd lived it. I'd nearly died from it. Come on, buddy, stay with me. I whispered, my hands shaking as I fumbled through my jacket pocket. I never go anywhere without my inhaler. Old habits. Old scars. I pressed it to his lips, gave 2 quick puffs, tilted his head back, and waited for a miracle that wasn't coming fast enough. He needed a hospital, now? 8 blocks to St. Mary's. Maybe 3 minutes before his lungs closed completely. I scooped him up. He was light, too light, and cold as metal. My arms screamed with every step, my chest burned like fire, but I didn't stop. I could hear my boots slapping the pavement, echoing down the empty street like a heartbeat. People stared when I passed, some shouted questions, others just froze. No one helped. But I didn't have time to explain. All I could think was, if this were Lily, if she were lying on this pavement right now, by the 5th block, my vision blurred. Sweat dripped into my eyes. My lungs began to seize, reminding me of my own fragility. I bit down on the pain and kept running, the boy's head pressed against my shoulder, his breath shallower with each passing second. 2 blocks left. I shouted through the ambulance bay doors, help! Severe asthma attack. Doctors rushed forward. A nurse pulled the boy from my arms, already fitting a mask over his face. I stumbled to the wall, gasping, my legs barely holding me up. My inhaler had bought us time, but time was running out. Then I heard a voice, sharp, professional, steady. Epinephrine now. The nurse's name tag flashed, Dr. Claire Whitmore. She looked down at the boy and froze, her face going pale. Oh my God, she whispered. That's Mason Whitmore. Everything around me went silent. I'd seen his face before, on missing posters, news alerts, every TV in the city. The millionaire's son who'd vanished 24 hours ago. And right there, leaning against the cold wall of the emergency room, still gasping for breath, I realized what I must have looked like. A dirty warehouse worker holding a missing boy. Before I could speak, the doors burst open again. Police stormed in. Guns low, radios crackling. Step away from the wall, one ordered. What? Hands behind your back. Now, cold steel bit into my wrists. I wanted to tell them I wasn't the villain in this story, that I'd just run 8 blocks to save a life. But no one was listening. The only sound left in the room was the boy's faint breathing, kept alive by the same inhaler I carried for myself. They didn't read me as a father who ran himself dry to carry a stranger's kid through the night. They read me as a headline with handcuffs. The room tilted while the officers closed in, Boots, metal, the pinch of the cuffs, my breath still ragged from the sprint. "Sir, don't resist." "I'm not," I said, voice hoarse. I brought him in, he couldn't breathe. No one answered that. Phones were already out. A couple of people recorded like it was a show. I tried to look past the shoulders, past the badges, to the gurney where the boy, Mason, lay under a flurry of calm hands and quick orders. I kept listening for the sound I knew too well, the first clean inhale after the medicine lands. That tiny, ordinary miracle. A nurse I'd almost collided with at the door stepped forward. He ran in carrying the child. "Ma'am, please stand back," one of the officers said, not unkind, just final. They walked me out past the automatic doors, and the cold hit harder than the cuffs. Blue and red lights strobed across the glass. I thought about Lily sitting at the little kitchen table with the wobbly leg, coloring or waiting up with that stubborn hope kids have. I pictured her face if I didn't come home. The thought did something ugly in my chest. They parked me on a plastic chair in a side hall while somebody spoke into a radio. I could still see through the door's window. Dr. Whitmore leaning over Mason, steady as a metronome. "Good. Keep him here. Keep air moving. Keep his world intact." "Name?" an officer asked, pulling out a notepad. "Jack Turner." "Address?" I gave it. He kept writing. "How did you end up with the Whitmore boy?" "I didn't end up with him," I said, trying to keep my voice level. "Two men dropped him on Maple. He was blue around the mouth. I used my inhaler and ran him here. That's it." He studied me like he could pull a lie off my face. "You carry an inhaler?" "Yeah," I said. "Been doing that since college. Severe asthma." Same sound he had. He wrote that down too, like it made me more suspicious. Another officer came back with a look that said decisions were already made. They pulled me up and walked me outside to the car. A couple of reporters had already gathered near the tape, shouting questions that made my stomach turn. I kept my eyes on the pavement and tried to breathe slow. The ride to the precinct felt longer than the 8 blocks I'd just run. The car smelled like old coffee and rain. I counted breaths. 4 in, hold, 6 out. The trick my old pulmonologist taught me when panic tries to pick the lock on your ribs. At the station, they took my belt, my shoelaces, my pride in small pieces. They put me in a gray room with a table that wobbled and a camera in the corner. The door clicked shut like the end of a sentence. A detective with tired eyes came in first. "I'm Morrison. Tell me the story from the top." I told it straight. End of shift. Maple Avenue. 2 men. One with a limp. The kid on the ground, barely breathing. My inhaler. The run. The ER doors. The orders for epinephrine. The cuffs. He let me talk, then leaned back. "You just happened to be on a deserted street. You just happened to have an inhaler. And you just happened to bring in the most famous missing child in the city." "That's the truth," I said. "You can call my supervisor. You can check the clock out time. You can swab the inhaler. His DNA will be on it. And check street cams on Maple. They'll show those men dropping him." He watched me a long beat. "You're a warehouse guy?" "Yeah." "Single parent?" "Yeah." "Where's the girl now?" "At home. Neighbor can sit with her if I don't make it back." The words came out flatter than I meant. He scribbled something, then stood. "Stay put." As if I had options. He left me with the hum of a bad fluorescent fixture and the taste of metal in my mouth. I flexed my fingers to get feeling back where the cuffs had sat. Every few seconds my brain tried to jump the rails to Lily, but I kept dragging it back to the hallway window, to the sound of a kid finally pulling a full breath. The door swung open so hard it hit the stopper. A woman stepped in, all sharp lines softened by lack of sleep. I recognized her from the business pages before I knew her from the ER, Claire Whitmore. She didn't look like a CEO now. She looked like a mother who'd been awake for 24 straight hours thinking about terrible things. "You," she said, voice low and shaking at the same time. "You had my son." "I carried him," I said, "so he wouldn't die on the sidewalk." Her eyes were red and furious. "Where did you take him? Who paid you? How long were you planning to?" "Ma'am," I said quietly, "I don't want your money. I want my kid to have a dad who comes home." That stopped her. Not all the way, just enough for air to get into the room. I told her again, the way I'd told the detective. Maple, the limp, the drop, the sound of a child drowning in plain air. I told her about my own lungs, the way fear turns your chest into a fist. I set the inhaler on the table like proof of intent. "You can test it. You can check cameras. You can call my boss." I didn't take him. I ran. She stared at the inhaler, at the beat-up plastic worn smooth where thumb meets habit. Her jaw unclenched a notch. Then she turned to Morrison, who'd come back and was standing in the doorway listening. "Pull every camera on, Maple," she said, command cutting through the stale air. "Now." The detective nodded to someone behind him. The door closed again, and the room got quiet except for that light and my heart. "Is he okay?" I asked because I had to. Her mouth trembled, fighting the truth into order. "He's breathing." I let my head drop. For the first time since the street, my shoulders loosened a fraction. "Good," I said. "That's good." We waited in a silence that had too much in it. Anger cooling, fear pacing, hope knocking like it wasn't sure it had the right address. After a while, a tech hurried in with a laptop and a tangle of cords. Morrison followed, eyes different now. He set the screen on the table and spun it toward us. Grainy footage. Timestamps. 2 men in a dead stretch of road, one hitching his step, both carrying a small body. The drop. The run. And then me, stupid, ordinary me, stepping into a choice I never planned to make. No audio, the text said, unnecessary. Claire watched the tiny version of her boy hit the pavement and slapped a hand over her mouth. The next part showed me stumbling into frame, freezing, and then moving like a man who'd decided there wasn't another option. I saw myself lift Mason, the awkward way I shielded his head with my forearm, the way my legs found a gear I didn't know they still had. The room didn't cheer. It just breathed. Morrison cleared his throat. "We'll get your statement typed up for release." He looked almost embarrassed now. "Mr. Turner, you can make a call." I nodded, but didn't reach for the phone yet. I kept my eyes on the last frame. 2 men running east, away from everything that matters. And then on the first clean breath that had started all of this. "Call your daughter," Claire said, voice softer, frayed in a human way now. "Tell her you're coming home." They let me sit in the same metal chair while everyone else in the building moved like they had something urgent to do. Morrison came back twice, once to drop off a cup of coffee that tasted like wet cardboard, and again to ask me the same questions he'd already written down. I gave him the same answers. The truth doesn't change just because you repeat it. When the door opened again, Claire Whitmore wasn't the polished executive from the business magazines anymore. She was a wreck of grief wrapped in a suit that had seen too many hours without rest. Her hair was flat against her temples, and her hands shook just enough to make the coffee in her paper cup tremble. "You took my son," she said. No question in it, just an accusation carved in stone. "Ma'am," I started, keeping my voice steady. "I found him on Maple Avenue. 2 men, one with a limp, dropped him and ran. I gave him my inhaler. I ran him here because he couldn't breathe." Her eyes narrowed, the kind of look that's used to making people confess even when they didn't do anything. "Do you have any idea what I've been living through? 26 hours not knowing if he was alive. You think I care about your story?" She slammed her hands on the table so hard the coffee cup jumped. "You watched him struggle to breathe. Did you know he has asthma? Did you even care?" The words hit me harder than I expected. "Yes," I said quietly. I knew. Her breath caught for a second, just enough to show she hadn't expected that answer. "I knew because I've had the same attack since I was 12, I said. "I carry an inhaler everywhere." I heard that sound in his chest, and I knew we had 3 minutes. That's all. So I ran. I reached into my pocket and set the inhaler on the table. Scuffed, cheap plastic, worn from years of use. "You can test it for DNA if you want. You'll find us on it. I don't have anything to hide." Claire's shoulders dropped a little, but her voice stayed brittle. "You expect me to believe that? That some warehouse worker just happened to be there at the right time?" I rubbed a hand over my face, exhaustion pressing down like a weight. "Believe whatever you want. I don't care what happens to me. Just don't let anyone stop helping him. The boy needs oxygen, and fast." The door opened. Morrison stepped in, holding a stack of printed photos. He looked between us, then set them on the table. "Ma'am, we just pulled footage from a building near Maple Avenue. You should see this." The screen on the laptop flickered to life. Grainy security footage, timestamp glowing in the corner. 2 men appeared, one tall, one stocky, the shorter one limping on his left leg. They carried a small body between them. They dropped him, argued for a moment, and bolted. Then, 10 seconds later, me. I watched myself on the screen, hesitating, frozen for a heartbeat before I knelt beside the kid. Then I saw my own arms scoop him up, the inhaler flash in my hand, and the run that nearly killed me. Claire covered her mouth. Her eyes filled before she looked away. That's the truth, Morrison said quietly. Exactly as he described. No one spoke for a long time. Claire reached toward the screen like she needed to touch it to believe it. Who are they? She whispered. Morrison flipped another photo. We traced their route. They got into a van registered under a shell company connected to Whitmore Holdings. After some digging, that leads to your brother-in-law, Richard Whitmore. Claire's face went white. Richard? Yes, ma'am. He hired them. We've got financial transfers and phone records. The plan was to take Mason for 48 hours and pressure you into signing over your shares. They didn't know about his asthma. When he had the attack, they panicked and dumped him. She sat down hard, staring at the table but not seeing it. The room was heavy with the kind of silence that only comes when a person's world caves in. Morrison turned to me. Mr. Turner, you're free to go. I didn't move right away. My legs didn't trust the words. He's going to be okay? They're keeping him overnight, but he's stable, Morrison said. If you hadn't acted when you did, it would have been too late. Claire still hadn't looked at me. She was staring into a place I couldn't see, maybe remembering every minute of the last 26 hours. When she finally spoke, her voice was small, stripped of the sharp edges it had before. I'm sorry, she said, for accusing you. I nodded. You were scared. I get it. But she shook her head slowly. No, I don't think you do. She stood, brushing a tear from her cheek, and for the first time that night, she really looked at me. Not at my clothes, not at the handcuffs that had been there, not at the file on the table, but at the man sitting across from her. Thank you, she whispered. Then she walked out of the room, leaving me alone with the faint buzz of the fluorescent light and the thought that sometimes doing the right thing doesn't look right at all. By the time they took off the cuffs, my wrists were raw. The metal had left a faint red ring around the skin, a souvenir I didn't ask for. Morrison handed me my inhaler and wallet with a nod that felt almost like an apology. You're free to go, Mr. Turner. We've got your statement. The rest will move fast from here. I wasn't sure what fast meant in his world, but I nodded anyway. My world had stopped hours ago somewhere between Maple Avenue and the hospital doors. When I stepped out of the interrogation room, Claire was there in the hallway, arms folded tight across her chest like she was holding herself together. She looked smaller now, not the face from the business pages, just a mother whose entire reality had tilted. I didn't know, she said quietly. About Richard. About any of it. I shrugged. You couldn't have. Her eyes glistened. You carried my son for 8 blocks. And I called you a criminal. Fear makes people see monsters, I said. You were scared. I'd probably have done the same. That earned the smallest, broken smile. No, she said, shaking her head. You wouldn't have. She turned as her phone buzzed. Morrison gave her space, and I started toward the exit, ready to put this night behind me, or try to. But before I reached the door, Claire's voice cut through the corridor. They found them, she said. I stopped. She was talking to Morrison, her tone suddenly sharp again, the executive returning to the surface. The kidnappers. They traced the van to a warehouse near the river. It's under one of Richard's shell companies. Morrison nodded grimly. We've already got a team there. Claire closed her eyes, as if the words themselves burned. My husband trusted his brother. After Andrew died, Richard said he'd help run the company, keep things steady for Mason and me. I believed him. I didn't know what to say to that. Some betrayals are too big for comfort. Morrison cleared his throat. We'll need you both to give follow-up statements once we finish the arrests. For now, Mrs. Whitmore, get some rest. And Mr. Turner, you might want to call your daughter. He wasn't wrong. The walk home felt longer than usual. Every step made me realize how close I'd come to losing more than just my breath that night. When I opened the apartment door, Lily was asleep on the couch with the TV still on, an empty cereal bowl balanced dangerously on the armrest. I tucked a blanket around her and just sat there for a while, watching her chest rise and fall. That sound, breathing. Ordinary, easy, steady. It never felt so sacred. A few days later, Morrison called. The case had exploded in the news. Richard Whitmore was under arrest, the kidnappers in custody. Their testimonies matched the footage perfectly. They'd been promised money and protection, told to hold Mason until Claire signed over her shares of the company. They hadn't counted on asthma or panic or me walking down Maple Avenue at the exact wrong time. I saw the headlines later that night. Billionaire's brother arrested in kidnapping plot. Child saved by warehouse worker. My name wasn't mentioned, and that was fine with me. The world didn't need another hero story. I just needed a normal life again. But normal didn't come easy. For the next 2 days, reporters swarmed my street. I kept the blinds closed, kept Lily inside. She thought it was exciting, people with cameras outside our building, until she realized we couldn't go to the park without them following. Then, on the third evening, someone buzzed our door. I opened it expecting another reporter, but it was Claire. No makeup, no entourage, just a woman in jeans, holding a tired smile. "I know this is probably the last thing you want," she said, "but I needed to thank you in person." "You already did," I said. She shook her head. "Not properly." Behind her car, I saw a small figure sitting in the back seat, staring out the window. Mason. He waved shyly when our eyes met. Claire followed my gaze. "He wanted to come. He doesn't remember much from that night. Just flashes, the sound of your voice, the way you held him. He asked if we could see you." Lily peeked around my leg, curious. 2 kids studied each other like they were from different planets. Then Mason held up a stuffed bear. "Hi," he said. "My mom said your dad saved me, so I brought you this." Lily's eyes went wide. "For me?" He nodded. And just like that, the tension melted. She took the bear, he grinned, and within seconds they were laughing like they'd been friends forever. Claire exhaled softly, the kind of sigh that comes after days of not breathing right. "He hasn't laughed like that since before the kidnapping." I didn't have an answer for that either. We stood there in the doorway, 2 worlds colliding. Hers built on glass and privilege, mine on sweat and rent overdue notices. And for a strange, quiet moment, none of that mattered. "Thank you, Mr. Turner," she said, "for saving my son, for believing in something good when I didn't." I nodded once. "You don't owe me thanks, Mrs. Whitmore. You owe it to him. To make sure the world he grows up in is kinder than the one that dropped him on that street." She smiled faintly. "I intend to." When she left, Lily clutched the bear like it was treasure. And for the first time in days, the apartment didn't feel so small. 2 mornings after the arrest hit the news, my doorbell rang while I was scraping the last of the peanut butter from the jar for Lily's toast. I wiped my hands on a dish towel and opened the door expecting a reporter. It was Claire. No camera crew, no driver in a suit. Just her, holding a leather checkbook like it weighed 50 pounds. "Mr. Turner." "Jack," she said, steady but tired. "I came to do this the right way." Lily peeked around my hip. Claire smiled at her, gentle, then looked back at me. "Could we talk for a minute?" I let her in. The apartment smelled like coffee and laundry detergent. The lamp on the counter had a crooked shade because the overhead light doesn't work unless you jiggle it. She noticed the stack of candles on the table and the bottles of water lined up on the counter, the kind of details rich people don't usually clock. She said nothing, which I appreciated. She opened the checkbook and clicked a pen. "I don't know what number makes something like this fair," she said. "So I'm going to start too high and you can pull me back down. Name your amount." I stared at the blank line. The number that tried to write itself in my head was rent caught up, then keep the power on, then new shoes for Lily, and finally breathe for a while. I felt all of that rise in my throat and then fall away. "I didn't do it for money," I said. Her pen paused midair. "Jack, you ran 8 blocks with my son in your arms. You gave him your medicine. You were arrested because you looked like the wrong kind of man at the wrong time. Let me do this." "I get why you want to," I said softly. "But if I take it, it changes the story. It makes it something it wasn't." I slid the checkbook back across the table with 2 fingers. I did it because it was right. She held my eyes, searching for the angle. There wasn't one. After a beat, she closed the checkbook and exhaled. "You are stubborn." "Been called worse," I said. Lily tugged my sleeve. "Dad, can I show her the picture I drew of the boy?" "Mason," Claire said, voice softening. "His name is Mason." Lily darted to the fridge and pulled down a crayon drawing. 2 stick kids holding hands, a big blue inhaler between them like a trophy. Claire smiled, and it wasn't the public one. It was smaller and honest. "Would Mason like to come over sometime?" Lily asked. "I can share my markers." Claire swallowed, emotions moving across her face too fast to hide. "I think he'd like that a lot." After she left, the apartment felt quiet but not empty. I washed the 2 plates in the sink and thought about the way her hand shook over a blank check. I thought about the look she got when she saw our candles, and how she didn't pity me. She just understood something she hadn't had to think about in a long time. Night fell early, like it does when your mind's still crowded. The power blinked once and died for good measure. I lit 2 candles and set them on the table. Lily sat across from me with her homework, tongue peeking out at the corner of her mouth the way it does when she concentrates. "Dad," she said without looking up. "Are we okay?" "Yeah, kiddo," I said. "We're okay. Are we the good guys?" I smiled. "We try to be." She wrote another crooked 7, then glanced at the window where the city kept humming without us. "I'm glad you ran." "Me too," I admitted, surprising myself with how true it sounded. We ate grilled cheese cut into triangles because that makes it taste better, even when the cheese is the cheap kind. I told Lily a bad joke about a sandwich walking into a bar. She laughed anyway. The candlelight made the chipped plates look warmer than they are. Later, after she fell asleep on the couch, I tucked a blanket around her and stood there listening to the small, even sound of her breathing. That ordinary music, the one I ran for. My phone buzzed on the counter. Unknown number. I answered. "Jack? It's Claire." A pause. Then, "He's asking about you. Mason. He remembers your voice. He says the air got easier when he heard you." I leaned against the counter, staring at the crooked lampshade. "Tell him the air lies sometimes," I said. "It pretends to run out. You just have to stay calm and make smarter air." She let out a breath that sounded like relief. "Smarter air," she repeated, like she wanted to keep the phrase. "Would you, if it's not too much, come by this weekend? He'd like to thank you himself." And I would too. I looked at Lily, asleep with a crayon still in her hand. "Yeah," I said. "We can do that." "Jack?" "Yeah." "For what it's worth," she said, voice lower now. There was no number I could have written that would have felt right. Refusing it somehow does. After the call, I set my inhaler on the counter next to the candle. It looked like a cheap piece of plastic until you're the one who can't breathe. Then it looks like grace. Some folks collect trophies. I collect moments when I didn't sell the part of me my kid depends on. That night, the city pushed its noise through the window, and I let it. I stood there a while, hands on the sink, and decided that whatever came next, reporters, whispers, the long shadow of people with money and power, I'd keep the story true. I carried a boy because he couldn't breathe. I said no to a blank check because some things don't have a price. In the morning, we'd make pancakes if the power came back. If not, we'd do cereal and smiles. Either way, we'd be okay. Saturday came gray and cool, the kind of day when you want to sleep in, but your kid's excitement won't let you. Lily had been up since 7, pacing the living room with her hair still wild from sleep. "Dad, are they really coming?" "They said noon." I told her, flipping pancakes that looked a little uneven. "That gives you plenty of time to pick up your markers before they get stepped on." She nodded seriously, then bolted to clean the living room like we were hosting royalty. By 11:50, I'd convinced myself Claire and her son wouldn't show. People like her had other worlds to return to, bright, well-lit ones with staff and gates and mornings that didn't start with overdue notices. But then a black SUV stopped outside, and before I could even reach the door, Lily was already shouting, "They're here." Claire stood in the doorway in jeans, a simple sweater, no armor of wealth today. Beside her, Mason clutched that same stuffed bear he'd brought before. He looked stronger, color in his cheeks again. "Come in," I said, suddenly aware of every scuff on the floor. Claire's eyes flicked around the room, not judgmental, just taking in the details. The second-hand furniture, the stack of bills tucked under a magnet on the fridge, the candles in jars waiting for the next outage. But she didn't look uncomfortable. If anything, she looked thoughtful. "I brought something," she said, setting a grocery bag on the counter. Inside were fresh strawberries, a loaf of bread that smelled like a bakery instead of a store, and real butter, something I hadn't bought in months. "You didn't have to." "I wanted to," she interrupted gently. "Consider it. Brunch with friends." The kids disappeared into Lily's room, their laughter bubbling through the thin walls. Claire leaned against the counter while I washed the frying pan. "He's been talking about her nonstop," she said. "Says she's the funniest girl he's ever met." "That's Lily," I said with a small grin. "She could make a statue laugh if she tries hard enough." Claire smiled, but her eyes drifted toward the candles again. "Do you lose power often?" I hesitated, then decided not to lie. "When the bills pile up, yeah. I make sure it doesn't bother her much. We call it camping nights. She thinks it's an adventure." Her expression softened in a way that felt almost painful to look at. "My mother used to do that. Pretend it was a game when we couldn't pay the heating bill." That surprised me. Didn't expect you to know that side of things. Most people don't, she said. Money came later. Back then, it was just mom, 2 jobs, and a lot of candles. For a while we just listened to the kids play. Mason's laughter mixed with Lily's, light and unguarded. They sound happy, I said. They are, she replied, almost to herself. He hasn't had a friend who understands what fear feels like. She does. We sat at the table drinking coffee from mismatched mugs. For the first time since that night, I saw her not as the CEO everyone else saw, but as a mother trying to hold together the pieces of her life. When it was time for them to leave, Mason hugged Lily goodbye like they'd known each other for years. Can she come to our house next time? He asked, looking up at his mom. We have a pool. Lily's eyes went wide. A pool. Claire laughed, a sound that broke through the stiffness between us. Yes, a pool. Maybe next weekend. I started to say something about bus routes, but she cut me off. I'll send a car, she said, then hesitated. Or better yet, why don't you both come? She'll want you there. When the door closed behind them, the apartment felt bigger somehow. Lily danced around the kitchen with her stuffed bear, singing something off-key. That evening, after she fell asleep, I sat at the window with my coffee growing cold, thinking about how strange life can turn. 2 weeks ago, I was another tired man with a time card and a broken lamp. Now, a woman whose face was on magazine covers had sat at my kitchen table talking about her childhood like we were old friends. But it wasn't the wealth or the difference between us that stuck with me. It was the look on her face when she heard our kids laugh together. It was the same look I'd had on Maple Avenue when I realized that boy still had a chance to breathe. Maybe that's what connects people. Not class, not luck, just the sound of someone else's lungs working because you decided to help. That night, I whispered a quiet prayer of thanks to whoever listens to Tired Fathers, for second chances and small, unexpected bridges between worlds that were never meant to meet. By spring, the world had almost gone quiet again. The reporters stopped calling. The story drifted off the news cycle, replaced by something shinier and faster. Mason's kidnappers pled out, Richard Whitmore made headlines for the wrong reasons, and life started to find its shape again. Mine looked mostly the same. Long warehouse shifts, cracked hands, Lily's laughter filling the silence when I came home. But every Saturday, a car would pull up outside our building, and Lily would yell, "They're here," before I even had time to change my shirt. The kids became inseparable. Mason and Lily built pillow forts, invented games with complicated rules, and shared secrets only 8-year-olds could understand. Claire and I fell into a rhythm of polite small talk that turned, bit by bit, into longer conversations, some about the kids, some about work, and sometimes about nothing at all. She'd tell me about the noise of boardrooms and how it could feel lonelier than any empty apartment. I told her about night shifts and back pain and the sound a forklift makes when it's almost out of gas. We came from opposite sides of the city, but somehow, the stories landed in the same place. Then one Tuesday afternoon, she showed up at the warehouse. I was on my lunch break, sitting on the concrete loading dock with a sandwich and a thermos of cheap coffee, when I heard a voice behind me say, "You always take your break here?" I turned, and there she was, standing in heels that didn't belong on this side of town, wearing a clean white coat that somehow stayed spotless even near the diesel fumes. Heads turned. Guys I'd worked with for years straightened up, whispering under their breath. "Claire," I said, standing fast enough to knock over my coffee. "What are you doing here?" "I came to talk business," she said, her eyes glinting like she knew exactly how strange that sounded. Here, she confirmed, stepping closer. "And stop calling me ma'am in front of your friends. It's Claire." She handed me a folder, sleek, black, embossed with a silver logo that looked more expensive than my rent. Pennington Logistics Division, it read. "I don't have a degree," I said automatically. "You have something better," she said. "Experience. Perspective. Integrity. My company's grown too disconnected from the people who actually move things. I need someone who understands what 15 minutes means to a worker on the floor. Someone who sees people, not just numbers." I blinked at her, trying to catch up. "You want me to work for you?" "I want you to lead," she corrected. "Head of logistics." I laughed before I could stop myself. "Claire, I wear steel-toed boots. The only head position I've had is head of cleaning up after everyone else." She didn't laugh. "And yet, you ran 8 blocks because you knew every second mattered. You made decisions under pressure that saved a life. You're exactly the kind of person I want managing people who move 1,000 tons a day. My coworkers had drifted closer, pretending to check the forklifts while obviously eavesdropping. I don't know, I said. I don't belong in boardrooms. Her voice softened. Neither did I once. She hesitated, searching for words. Mason trusts you more than anyone. That means something to me. Take the offer, Jack. You've earned more than this. I looked down at the folder again. It didn't feel real. I'd spent years learning to keep my head down, to survive one paycheck at a time. The idea of walking into an office with my name on a door felt like something meant for another man's life. I'll think about it, I said finally. Good, she said with a small smile. But not too long. We could use someone who remembers what real work looks like. Then she turned and walked off, leaving a trail of silence behind her. When I went back inside, my foreman raised an eyebrow. You just get scouted by a millionaire? Something like that, I said, still dazed. That night, after Lily was asleep, I sat at the kitchen table staring at the folder. Inside was a letter printed on heavy paper, formal as a wedding invitation. Employment offer, head of logistics, Pennington Industries. A number sat at the bottom of the page. I'd never seen that much money attached to my name in my life. The next morning, I took the bus downtown and walked into the glass tower I'd only ever seen from the outside. Claire's assistant, a woman named Margaret with sharp eyes and a kind smile, met me in the lobby. Mrs. Whitmore's expecting you, she said. When I stepped into Claire's office, she was standing by the window, sunlight cutting across her hair. You came, she said. I did. And I'll take it, I said. But I'm keeping the boots. She laughed, a real laugh this time. Deal. That was the start of something I never saw coming. The first weeks at Pennington felt like walking into a movie where everyone else already knew their lines. I learned fast. I listened more than I talked. And when I did talk, I kept it simple. Water stations closer to the floor, staggered breaks so nobody lost their shot at a real rest, fans in summer, portable heaters in winter. Nothing fancy, just respect with a power cord. Numbers started moving the right way. So did people. Guys on the floor stopped looking through me and started waving me over to show where a process snagged. I kept the boots like I promised. The suit jacket came off most days before lunch. Saturdays turned into a ritual. Lily and me on the curb when a black SUV rolled up. Mason would hop out before the driver could park. Lily would attack him with some new game she invented on the spot. Inside Claire's house, rooms had names: parlor, library, conservatory, but the kids renamed them with blanket forts and Lego cities. I stayed awkward for a while, then less so. Claire and I found a steady rhythm. She handled homework and piano practice. I handled snacks and anything with batteries that quit under pressure. Sunday dinners rotated between her place and mine. At her table, real silver clinked against plates while I reached for the wrong fork and nobody died. At mine, mismatched dishes in a pan that always leaned to one side. Claire never flinched. She did the dishes like she'd been doing them her whole life. Sometimes I caught her studying Lily the way I watched Mason, quiet, grateful, like we couldn't quite believe we got to care about another kid this much. There wasn't a speech or a label for what we were turning into. It was just this. Lily stopped asking if Mason was coming and started asking when. Mason started calling our place the other house. When one of them got a cold, the other showed up with crayons and a bossy list of rules for taking medicine. December came quick. The company party filled a downtown ballroom with soft lights and the kind of music that makes expensive shoes move slow. I hate ties, but Margaret, the assistant who has a way of knowing what I'm about to resist, handed me one and said, "Humor us." So I did. Lily and Mason ran figure eights between grown-ups holding tiny plates. Claire worked the room like she was born doing it, then drifted back to us every few minutes, grounding herself with a hand on Mason's shoulder or a smile at something Lily said. I was mid-sentence with two line managers when I heard it. A thin wheeze, almost polite, like trouble knocking first. My body moved before my head did. Across the dance floor, past a waiter balancing shrimp on a silver tray, I dropped to a knee beside Mason. "Hey, champ," I said easy. "What's the drill?" He nodded, eyes wide but steady. "We'd practiced this." I had the spacer and inhaler out in a heartbeat. "Seal it. One puff. Big hole." He breathed the way we'd rehearsed on boring afternoons when it felt pointless to practice things you hope never happen. Claire spun toward us, panic bright on her face. then watched the steps she'd learned too. Count with me, Mace, I said. 10, 9. By 6 the tightness started to ease. By 0 he was blinking like a kid coming out of a bad dream. It's okay, I told him, hand on his shoulder. You're all right. Smarter air, remember? He gave me a shaky smile. Claire didn't move for a second. She just watched his fingers curl around mine like it was the most normal thing in the world. Then she exhaled, a real exhale, the kind you only trust when fear lets go a notch. Thank you, she whispered, but it sounded different this time. Not the formal kind, not the courtroom kind. Something smaller and deeper. Margaret materialized beside her, because that's what Margaret does. She looked at us, at the way Lily pressed a paper napkin into Mason's hand, in case tears, and then at Claire. Haven't seen him trust someone like that since Andrew, she said soft enough that only we could hear. And I haven't seen you look at anyone like that since, well. Claire didn't answer right away. She watched me recheck the spacer, watched me tuck a backup inhaler into the inside pocket of Mason's blazer because I'd stitched a tiny Velcro pouch there, just in case. Then she looked up and met my eyes like there was finally no noise between us. After the scare, the party turned warm instead of fancy. We left early. In the garage, Mason fell asleep before I buckled the second strap. Lily nodded off against Claire's arm in the back seat, clutching a candy cane like a flag. Out on the street, snow started in a slow, uncommitted way. Claire stood beside me at the open trunk while I dug for a blanket. City Light painted white lines across her hair. Jack, she said. Just my name, but full of meaning. Yeah. I keep trying to name this, she said, half laughing at herself. Whatever we're doing. Whatever we've become. I looked through the window at the two kids, open-mouthed and out cold, their heads tipped toward each other like magnets. Feels name to me, I said. Just doesn't need letters. She smiled at that, small, certain. Then she slid her hand into mine. No speech. No promises. Just a quiet fit that made more sense than anything I could have planned. When we got to her place, I carried Mason in, counting steps the way you do when the weight matters more than the number. Claire carried Lily, who mumbled something about pancakes and diplomacy. We tucked them into the same couch with 2 blankets and a truce declared between sleep and sugar. In the kitchen, I made cocoa like I always do. Too hot, then perfect. She leaned on the counter and watched the steam rise. Whatever happens next, she said, I want you to know you're not temporary. I nodded, because some words don't need echoes. We stood there listening to 2 kids breathing in a house that didn't sound lonely anymore. The city kept snowing in that soft, useless way. My tie was crooked and my heart wasn't. We didn't say family. We didn't have to. It was already in the room. It's been 2 years since that night on Maple Avenue. The street doesn't look the same anymore. New lights, fresh pavement, even a coffee shop on the corner where the boarded-up warehouse used to be. Every time I pass it, I stop for a minute. Not long. Just long enough to remember. People call what happened the miracle of 3 minutes. I don't think it was a miracle. It was panic, sweat, luck, and a stubborn refusal to let a kid die while I was standing there. But sometimes I wonder, maybe that's what miracles really are. Life looks different now. Lily's got her own room in a house that smells like fresh bread and paint instead of dust. Mason's inhalers line up on a shelf above his baseball trophies. And me? I've got an office keycard that still feels too heavy for my pocket and a wife who thinks I hang the moon. Yeah, wife. Claire and I got married last summer in the park where the kids fly their kites. It wasn't big, just a few close friends, some laughter, and 2 kids trying to act serious while they carried the rings. Lily wore a white dress that made her look older than she should, and Mason kept fixing his tie like it was trying to choke him. When the pastor asked if anyone objected, Mason raised his hand. I object if they don't do it, he said, dead serious. Because he's already my dad. Everyone laughed. Claire cried. I barely got the words, I do out. Afterward, the 4 of us went home and ordered pizza. No speeches, no toasts, just sauce on napkins and 2 kids arguing over who got the last slice. That's when it hit me. This is what peace sounds like. Not silence, but life happening around you without fear. We started the Whitmore Turner Foundation a few months later. Every inhaler we distribute to families who can't afford them carries a small card that says, 3 minutes can change everything. Claire came up with the words, but I wrote the line below it. Choose courage. Because that's all it really was. 3 minutes. A decision between looking away or stepping forward. Sometimes people call me a hero. I correct them when I can. Heroes plan. I just reacted. The real hero of that night was the part of me that didn't let fear vote. Richard Whitmore's still in prison. The men he hired got lesser sentences and were released early. I don't think about them much. But sometimes, when I walk Maple Avenue, I wonder if they think about that boy, the sound of him wheezing, the sight of me running. Maybe it changed them too. Maybe not. Doesn't matter now. At home, Mason likes to remind me that he's the reason everything turned out the way it did. He's not wrong. Without him, I'd still be that tired warehouse worker counting minutes until I could see my kid. Without him, Claire would still be fighting her wars in boardrooms, and Lily would still be drawing pictures of a mom who left instead of living with one who stayed. Now, nights end differently. Sometimes I'll find Claire reading beside the fire, her wedding ring catching the light. The kids will be upstairs arguing over who gets to feed the dog, and I'll stand there for a moment, hands in my pockets, breathing in the sound of belonging. It still catches me sometimes. The memory of that boy's small chest barely moving, the weight of him in my arms, the cold night air cutting my throat. But then I'll hear Lily laugh from upstairs, or Claire call my name, and the world rights itself again. Maple Avenue isn't just a street anymore. It's a reminder. It's where fear met courage, where strangers became family, and where I learned that doing the right thing doesn't make you a hero. It just makes you human. 3 minutes. That's all it took to change for lives forever. And if you asked me today why I ran, I'd still tell you the same thing I told Claire that night in the station. I didn't do it for money. I did it because it was right. But now, I'd add one more truth. It turned out to be the best decision I ever made. Not for what I gained, but for who we became.